Hey, this has been a fun day on MSNBC. I'm going to have to go to Fox shortly. But anyway, Ron Nearing, who is a Ted Cruz surrogate, got on with Tameron Hall, and she actually did a fairly decent job, not as good as she did with Sarah Huckabee, but a fairly decent job in trying to nail down Nearing on Ted Cruz's comments about patrolling Muslim neighborhoods with law enforcement. Now, I skipped past his attack on Donald Trump, which he filibustered for a good 2 minutes, and then but she did bring him back to her initial question about his patrolling of the Muslim neighborhoods, and then he starts to spin. So here we go.
Senator Cruz is also on the hot seat. Some are saying that he has decided to really blow up this wives feud to distract from controversial comments that he made regarding policing Muslim Americans in so-called Muslim neighborhoods. You have NYPD Commissioner Bill Bratton's op-ed, and it goes on to say, "We do not patrol and secure neighborhoods based on selective enforcement because of race or religion, nor will we use the police and an occupying force to intimidate a populace or a religion to appease the provocative chatter of politicians seeking to exploit fear." It is clear from his comments that Senator Cruz knows absolutely nothing about counterterrorism in New York City. Granted, a tabloid report is not something I'm sure your candidate wants to talk about, but it certainly got the attention off of what seemed to be heavily criticized comments from many, including the largest police department in the United States, the head of that department slamming Senator Cruz.
Well, let's be really clear about this. Donald Trump decided that he thought it was fair game to go after Senator Cruz's wife repeatedly, to do so personally, and then he decided that it was okay to try to, say that, well, Ted Cruz started it, when in fact he knows very well that that wasn't the case whatsoever. In fact, what Donald Trump's behavior is not only insulting toward Heidi Cruz, but also various other women, including Carly Fiorina, Megyn Kelly, and the like. And this is par for the course for Donald Trump, who doesn't want to talk about the real issues. This is why he canceled and ducked out of the most recent debate, why he said he doesn't want to have any more debates, why he's holed up in Trump Tower trying to avoid answering for what he said in terms of the New York Times interview. He still has not allowed the New York Times to release this tape of his off-the-record comments with their editorial board, and now we know why, because it was probably fairly similar to his total lack of knowledge that he demonstrated in his meeting with the Washington Post editorial board. So, if we want to talk about the issues that are facing this country, security is one of those issues, particularly in light of the horrible events that we've seen in Pakistan and in Brussels and the like. And I think that what we see is that very often on the part of this administration and on the part of some of the Europeans as well, that political correctness has been allowed to overcome common sense. And nobody is talking about targeting anyone based upon, their ethnicity or their religion or
Now, just so that you know, he went on 1 minute and 20 seconds before he finally starts to circle back to partially answer her question, and then he lies because he just got through saying that nobody's talking about targeting. But that's exactly what Cruz's statement, though, was, that the police need to patrol Muslim neighborhoods. So this is a lie. It's an out-and-out lie.
Simply saying that.
But what is he saying then when Senator Cruz says policing Muslim communities, that is targeting? Well, I'll let you go on.
Protections of the Bill of Rights better than Senator Cruz does.
Okay, when he says policing Muslim communities, is that not targeting? What is that?
I'm sorry?
When Senator Cruz calls for the policing of Muslim neighborhoods and communities, is that not targeting based on someone's...
Hold on. Well, let's be clear about this.
See, now you got to be careful. She didn't use the right words, okay? She should have said increase patrols and policing targeted at Muslim communities. So you got to be careful, because this guy is excellent as far as using the words that you use to try to work against you.
One deserves to have protection of the government.
And he's right.
And number two, your question presupposes that the police are somehow the bad guys in a situation like this.
Oh no, let me pause you and let me play the police officer who heads the New York Police Department. Can we play it?
Cut him off, Tameron.
Senator Cruz was talking about a unit here in the NYPD that was put in place right after 9/11, the demographics unit. At one time it had 14 to 16 detectives, and the attempt was made to identify where did various communities live in New York City, and very specifically Muslim communities and many diverse nationalities that make up that community. The unit was disbanded by myself, but it's been portrayed by many of the tabloids and by Senator Cruz that somehow or another by disbanding that unit that we lost a valuable tool in the fight against terrorism. We did not. It was never an investigatory entity.
So, Ron, I think your point was I am juxtaposing somehow that the police are wrong. That's the head of the police department criticizing Senator Cruz. So can you specifically respond to Bill Bratton's criticism of Senator Cruz? Don't pivot. Don't respond to that, please.
So there are a couple of things here. Number one, I think it's worth noting that Rudy Giuliani was critical of the decision to disband the demographics unit, number one.
And we all know that Rudy Giuliani is one of the biggest racists that are in America today. And he was a total racist asshole when he was mayor of New York. And these guys always want to fall back to Rudy Giuliani, who, by the way, in my opinion, is partially responsible for some of the deaths that occurred in the collapse of the World Trade Towers during 9/11, because it was his buddy who supplied the communication equipment to the first responders, and that communication equipment didn't work, and they knew it.
Two, it's worth noting that any city's demographics continually change, and to disband that demographics unit by Mayor Michael Bloomberg, actually, contrary to the decision that had been made by Mayor Giuliani, the unit being disbanded by Mayor de Blasio and having been in place under Mayor Michael Bloomberg, really I think says something. And then the fact that Rudy Giuliani was critical of that decision, and Rudy Giuliani is not a Ted Cruz supporter, I think is worth noting. Secondly, the unit actually did wind up producing numerous leads. However, even though it wasn't an investigative unit, it provided a roadmap for police investigators to have a better idea as to just where various radical elements were preying upon the Muslim community. And thirdly, I think it's really important to know that the first victims in any community where you have radical elements are those people who are already living in that community. So what does someone suggest? That police protection shouldn't be in that area? We want to make sure.
Okay, that was spin. Because the radical elements within the communities. Now, we're talking about radicals. We're not talking about gangsters and gangs and stuff, because they normally prey within their own communities. We're talking about radical elements, i.e. the terrorists. They don't bomb their own communities. They bomb elsewhere. So what he just said is a bunch of bullshit.
That those people who are in those communities understand that they can call the police. My parents were immigrants. They were intimidated to deal with the government at any point in time, and that's why having police units that are working with leaders in those communities in the same way that Rudy Giuliani approached the issue of confronting the mob there's great value to that. And what's dangerous is allowing political correctness to say, no, we're not going to be in those communities at all because that's politically incorrect.
Are you saying Bill Bratton is a victim of political correctness? The head of the New York Police Department? Is Bill Bratton, the head of the NYPD, the commissioner, the victim of political correctness, as you referred to?
Well, look, he's certainly entitled to his opinion, and there's a debate going on inside of this country as to what our approach should be going forward.
He didn't answer the question, as usual.
I would say that it's very clear that where some of these terrorists have been radicalized and where they have attempted to spread their version of Islam, which is a violent interpretation of Islam, that it's important that the good people who live in those communities know that they have the ability to turn to the police, to work with the police in order to combat that where it happens. We have one of the terrorists who was responsible in the Paris bombings who was hiding in plain sight in a Muslim community in Brussels. That doesn't mean that everyone else in that community is a bad person, but it does mean that there needs to be a common sense law enforcement presence there. So, number one, to assist in terms of tracking down bad people who commit crimes or who are prone to do so.
Okay.
And number two, to make sure that the good people who live in those communities know that they don't have to give in. They don't have to give in to the radical elements at all in that community.
Ron Neering, thank you so much for your time. We greatly appreciate it. I know we'll be talking much more in the future. Thanks, Ron. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
She did a pretty good job here. Now, but he did a pretty good job himself, spinning away from actually answering the question. And again, Ted Cruz, he doesn't know jack shit about law enforcement, but he wants to make us believe that he does. And Bill Bratton caught his ass and basically set him straight as far as counterterrorism, especially in New York City.